Let's talk about the thing I wanted to talk about regarding cool jobs. So this is a feature courtesy of the New York Times. Big up the blood clot New York Times. The title of the article is "It's the End of Work as We Know It, and I Feel Powerless to Fight the Technology That We Pioneered. Nostalgic for a world that moved on without us after decades of paying our dues for a payday that never came. So yeah, not exactly fine. The Gen X Career Meltdown." Now this is an interesting one because essentially the article says that all the cool jobs are gone. And I'm a good example and I'm a good testament, and I can definitely agree with that because I have a lot of experience in doing cool jobs such as like social media management, marketing, community management, being a brand ambassador, all that sort of nonsense, right? So I've done all these type of things, and influencer marketing too, right? Marketing, social media. I've noticed in the last few years, my last actual two positions, my actual last paid jobs weren't even in those fields. They're in customer service. But my experience is obviously 10 years plus in those type of areas. But I've noticed a real lack in those jobs being around. And I've also noticed that my lack of success in landing them, you know? So it's making me believe that most likely, I don't think the market has improved with loads of quality applicants. No, actually, I take that back. Most likely there's less jobs going around, and there's probably more of us trying to look for them. But there's more people out there with probably way more experience than I have, or way more specialized experience. So that we're all competing for these jobs, but there's a finite amount of them, and there's so many people with loads of experience, and it's hard to choose from what's available, which is why people like myself can get usually kind of left and ditched behind. So we're in an interesting time, and I feel like, and I wonder where it goes. Like, where does it go? Do the people that had cool jobs, do you have to like now learn a trade? Do you pivot to another career? Do you try and make it work and set up your own thing? Like, what do you do when you find out that all the cool jobs are now gone in this like in this current AI world we live in, and with the economy being the way it is? I wonder. Let's read the article. The Gen X Career Meltdown, written by Stephen Kurutz. Let's read what they have to say here. In Generation X, the 1991 novel that defined the generation born in 1960s and 1970s, Douglas Copeland chronicled a group of young adults who learned to reconcile themselves to diminishing expectations of material wealth. Lessons Mr. Copeland said he called philosophy. For many of the Gen Xers who embarked on their creative careers in the years after the novel was published, lessness has come to define their professional lives. If you entered media or image making in the 90s, magazine publishing, newspaper journalism, photography, graphic design, advertising, music, film, and TV, there's a good chance that you're now doing something else for work. God damn it. That's true. That's because those industries have shrunk or transformed themselves radically, shutting out those whose skills were once in demand. Quote, "I'm having a conversation every day with people whose careers are sort of over," says Chris Wilcher, a 53-year-old film and TV director in Los Angeles. Talk with people in their late 40s and 50s who once imagined they would be able to achieve great heights, or at least a solid career while flexing their creative muscles, and you're likely to hear about a photographer whose work dried up, the designer who can't get hired, or a magazine journalist who isn't doing much of anything. And whenever I think about these people, just my commentary here, I'm reminded of that period, and which broke my heart, by the way, because I saw it play in real time, because I think I was maybe flirting with the idea. Now I don't really care. But I remember just before the pandemic, I think I was flirting with the idea of moving to Berlin. Flirting with it, in my mind only. But I really wasn't really down for it ever, because I've always been a big believer in like having your fun, but then coming back home and doing work. So I never want to live in a place where all that fun's going on, right? I always want to be able to kind of toil and work for my money, and then use that money to then fly over to a place like Berlin or wherever else I want to go, have my fun and come back. But I was briefly flirting with the idea. So I think because I was flirting with the idea, I was more receptive and conscious of other people who were also flirting with the idea or making or taking the leap to jump and go there. So I think I was reading a lot of like, I was on the Berlin subreddit. I was finding loads of accounts on social media of people who were making that change. I was reading interviews. I was just consuming a lot of that content. So I remember precisely when the lockdown happened, when COVID spread, and when the lockdown happened, I remember a bunch of people who had recently left the UK specifically or other countries in Europe to go and move to Berlin to chase their dreams or to go have some fun. I remember reading so many articles, so many fucking posts, seeing so many Instagram stories of people legitimately having like breakdowns, mental breakdowns, because the place they moved to for all this fun is now no longer the fun place because COVID lockdowns in, so now the clubs can open, and they're now having to like figure out what to do. Because, you know, and imagine how much of a mindfuck that is. You go to Berlin to try and make it as a musician, to try and make it in the scene. Maybe you want to be a DJ. Maybe you want to be a fucking door picker. Maybe you want to work in a cloakroom of a club. Maybe you want to work in a coffee shop. Whatever you want to do. And now suddenly all those things are shut. And now you're in a strange city that you don't know, having to figure out what to do with your life whilst being stuck indoors. Complete mindfuck. And when the world reopens again, the jobs that you wanted probably aren't there anyway. So you still have to pivot. It's such a crazy thing to think about. Anyway, let's digress. Gen Xers grew up as younger siblings of their baby boomers, but media landscapes of their early adult years closely resembled that of the 1950s. A tactile analog environment of landline telephones, tube TV sets, vinyl records, glossy magazines, and newspapers that left ink on your hands. When digital technology began seeping into their lives with its AOL email accounts, MySpace pages, and Napster downloads, it didn't seem like a threat. But by the time that they entered the primes of their careers, much of their expertise had become all but obsolete. What it? More than a dozen of members of Generation X interviewed for this article said that they now find themselves shut out economically and culturally from their chosen fields. If they're feeling shut out, imagine us, the fucking millennials, imagine. My peers, friends, and I continue to navigate the unforeseen obsolescence of career paths we chose in our early 20s, said Mr. Wilker. Quote, the skills you cultivated, the craft you honed, it's gone. It's startling. God damn. Every generation has its burdens. The particular plight of Gen Xers has grown in one world, only to hit middle age in a strange new land. Exactly. I think that's what happened during COVID, by the way, as well. So I think that's also why a lot of Gen Zs are a little bit weird. You know, I think a lot of people can ascribe to that. And I think a lot of Gen Zers out there could also kind of confess. I think a lot of a reason why Gen Zers are strange and have weird like practices and whatever habits and shit in the workplace is because a lot of these kids, like, you know, had to essentially grow up at home. You know, some of these kids don't even go to uni. That's a mad thing. Some of these kids didn't even go to campus. They had to do fucking uni from home. Imagine that. 3 years of the most important period of your like kind of young life, your formative life, and you're doing it all at home behind a screen. God damn. Karen McKinley, and then when you get into the workplace, suddenly AI exists. And you're like 24. You're like, what the fuck? Now AI exists and I have to compete with this. It's like, wow. Honestly, God bless the Gen Zers out there. Karen McKinley, 55, an advertising executive in Minneapolis, has seen talented colleagues quote unquote thrown away. She said, as agencies have merged, trimmed staff, and focused on fast, cheap social media content over elaborative photo shoots. Yes, of course. I've noticed that in my field with social media management. Nowadays, I feel like the change that I've seen is that when I used to be a social media manager, I used to also be a social media assistant or coordinator, whatever it's called, or executive, sorry. And usually that meant I was a part of the marketing team, or there was a social media manager that worked above me. But now I've noticed they've shrunk that. Now I've noticed a lot of companies just get the social media manager to do the job that I would have done and to do the job that other assistants would have done. So it's now been merged into one role, you know, instead of it being a marketing team with a manager and other people that work underneath it. And I'm assuming it's even worse now with AI. Quote, 20 years ago, you could actually have a shot or a shoot, said Mr. McKinley. Now, you may use influencers who have no advertising background. Yeah, I learned that recently, by the way, because I was reading, or I was checking out, I was on YouTube, and this guy's video I stumbled across, who was like, oh yeah, how I made however much money, da da da. And those videos always kind of, they get me with a clickbait. But it was really cool because it was an influencer guy who essentially was saying that a lot of his work that he does, he's a photographer, videographer, sorry. A lot of the clients that he gets them because he goes out and essentially he'll buy a pair of Levi's, let's say, and you'll do a shoot and you'll tag Levi's in it. And then sometimes he gets some inbound work through Levi's, seeing what he did, when he bought a pair of Levi's and the shoot he did, and wanted to work with him on a campaign. So that's how what Levi's are doing. Levi's would rather get a kid who's already creating content, has a following on social media, to make their own shoots, get their attention, and then they use that kid on their shoots, tag that kid in the shoot on social, and then help that to boost their social media, as opposed to actually using professional photographers who've been in the industry, who went to college and shit. So now, if you went to college and you went to university, wherever, for photography, you've been in the industry for a long time, you assisted for all the big photographers, you were on set in all these big movies, you're now able to compete with some kid somewhere who's got a phone and an imagination. A phone and imagination and a big following. Like, it's brutal. It continues. In the wake of influencer comes another threat: artificial intelligence, which seems likely to replace many of the remaining Gen X copywriters, photographers, and designers. By 2030, ad agencies in the United States will lose 32,000 jobs, or 7.5% of the industry's workforce, to technology, according to research from Forrester. Last September, Miss McKinley co-founded Giza Creative, an ad agency intended to be a haven for Gen X talent. We've been absolutely bombarded by creative folks over 50, or even approaching 50, because they're terrified. Yeah, I'd imagine. That's a really good name, by the way. Giza Creative is a fucking great name for an ad agency or for a studio, whatever, aimed towards Gen Xers. I really like that. The shedding of jobs and the upending of long-standing business models have come at a bad time for Gen Xers. The cost of living has skyrocketed, especially in coastal cities, and the burden of mortgages, children's college tuitions, and elder care can be the heaviest in the middle-aged. Retirement isn't that far off, theoretically, but Gen Xers are less financially secure than baby boomers and lack sufficient retirement savings, according to recent surveys. Yeah, imagine the amount of people who are 50 now and still working, not because they enjoy it, but because they have to, like working hard. That's a really sad thing about living in this country, or living in any kind of Western world, or, you know, country in the first place, is that it feels like, unless you're like anointed, unless you've got an entrepreneurial spirit, unless you've got maybe some help from the family, you're basically going to be busting your ass right until the end. You're busting your ass right until the end. There is no slowing down. There is no taking your foot off the pedal. You're going to be working just as hard as you're working now at 27, when you're going to be 47, when you're going to be 57. That's the really depressing part about it. You know? So that's why it probably is important, if you can hear the sound of my voice, to just enjoy life while you can. Don't wait for this moment in the end where everything's going to be fine and you're going to have more time to do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as like future more time. It's time right now, you know? And if you can't enjoy it now, you're fucked, because, you know, life or time isn't guaranteed, and you're probably going to be working until the last moment that you take a breath on this fucking dear fucking planet of ours. It continues. The old economy still holds sway in a few places. Legacy media companies that didn't get devoured by the internet, film studios that remained flush with cash, but even those businesses, the number of jobs have gone down, the workers are uneasy. What's to prevent their little island from going under in the next wave of change? The cruel irony is the thing I perceived as a sellout move is in freefall. Big up Chris Walker. It continues. Death throes. Steve Cadell couldn't believe his luck. Growing up as a fan of punk and alternative rock in suburban New Jersey in 1980s, he had been an avid reader of music magazines, and now here he was, working for Spin, the Gen X successor to Rolling Stone. I remember Spin magazine. That was a really good mag. He assigned and edited features. He wrote cover stories about Bruce Springsteen, Amy Winehouse, and U2. Spin paid for his reporting trips. Oh, remember that? Remember when you used to get paid to go places and report? Remember? God damn. Gave him weeks to write his articles, which could run as long as 5,000 words. In keeping with generational stereotype, Mr. Kendall had been a slacker in his mid-20s, or in his 20s. He landed his first big job in New York in 2002 when he was 30. It was the early days of the internet, but print publications were still thick with ads. So he was happy to sign on as an assistant editor at Maxim. Oh, I remember that. I remember Maxim. That was one of the early lad kind of like bro manosphere magazines. Bro, you could not, some of those magazines you couldn't have around. Max Power I used to read, Maxim. There's a few other magazines. Those bro magazines were, I think, more toxic than anything you see online now. The magazine that was part of the short-lived laddie trend. At its height, it was paid monthly. Circulation of more than 2.5 million, far surpassing the readership of GQ and Esquire, which began to look staid by comparison. I was in my 30s, says this guy, making 31 grand a year. Making 31 grand a year in 2002, that's money, bro. That is money. You know that? $30,000 in 2002 is money. Money. Quote, I remember an editor said, "You don't want to work here. There will be a line around the block." There was this sense that you could get to do this. You get to do this, sorry. By the time he joined Spin in 2007, the industry was in trouble. As readers spent more time online, magazines relying on print ads were flailing. In the early 2000s, Spin monthly circulation was 530,000. By 2011, it was 460,000. Woo! That's a big drop. That's gonna make your finance person in your company heart flutter. That's gonna keep them up at night because they know once it starts dropping, it's not gonna go up again. It continues. Like many other publications, Spin tried to remake itself as an online brand. It started an iPad version. Oh, I remember that. I remember when magazines were trying to switch to the iPad. It didn't work. It didn't work. They tried to make an iPad-friendly version. That shit did not work, bro. And beefed up its website to compete with digital rival Pitchfork. In 2012, the print edition was bi-monthly, and Spin started charging less for ads. Then it was sold to Buzz Media, an owner of music celebrity website, and print edition folded. The quote, "We were in the death throes," says Mr. Candle, whether we knew it or not. The changes affected other fields too. When photography went digital, photo lab technicians and manual retouchers were suddenly as essential as medieval scribers. I didn't even think about it. That's true, isn't it? If you work in a photo lab or you are a manual retoucher, your job is basically done, unless you're a specialist or something. But everybody else, your job is fucked. You're done. The ubiquity of smartphone cameras and easy-to-use editing software made those in possession of old skills seem almost quaint. Chris Gentle, who was the creative director of in-house photo studio at the magazine company Condé Nast from 2004 to 2011, said that the top photographers used to earn 5 figures for a shoot. Oh my God, no more. Now he said you can hire a 20-year-old who will do the job for $500. You see, that's what I don't like. That's what I don't like. That's why I think it's important for people that work in the creative field to be vocal and open about how much they make, or how much they earn, or how much they've been, what's that word called? How much they've been offered. Because that I don't like. You used to pay photographers 5 figures. Now you're paying kids 500,000 because using a smartphone. No. You're paying for their time. You're paying for their notoriety. You're paying for their clout. You're paying for their following, and you're paying for their skills. Doesn't matter if they use an SLR or a phone. Pay them the rate. That's why people should demand more. Don't be happy with just the 500 because you get given free stuff and they invite you out and they give you free fucking Pret sandwiches. I don't fucking like that. That's fucking scummy. But it continues. Carl Chisholm, a photographer who grew up in Harlem and was in credits including shooting Anna Wintour for a masterclass campaign, said that the editorial budgets were already shrinking by the time he started his career in New York in the mid-2000s. There was no way you could survive anymore being strong at one thing, says this guy. I worked at a studio. I photo assisted. I did production work, and all the while shooting small jobs for myself. Even now, he added, if things are truly slow, I'm not above assisting a friend on their shows. I have a family. Yeah, exactly. That's when shit gets real. When you have a pet or a family, that's where shit gets real, because you have a mouth that's relying on you. You have a belly that's relying on you to be filled. You have to get that shit done by hook or crook. So big up Carl Chisholm for knowing how to fucking focus. You get me? And do what needs to get done. It continues. In advertising, brands ditched print and TV campaigns that required large crews for marketing plans that relied on social media posts. A trend that started with the debut of Instagram in 2010. I forgot about that. Jesus Christ. That TV spot you spent 6 months on now becomes a TikTok execution you spend 6 days on, said Greg Paul, principal of R3, a marketing aid consult. By the way, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think spending 6 months on a TV ad is fucking insane anyway. They were stealing money. They were, you know what I mean? They were taking a piss as well. You should be spending 6 days or less. It continues. Pan Morris 54, a freelance prop stylist, noticed another unsettling trend a few years ago. When a US client asked her to art direct a crew in Asia remotely for a shoot, they're just outsourcing, she says. It must be cheaper. Wow. Yeah, exactly. Miss Morris added that in her group chats with colleagues, the main topic lately has been the effect of AI and computer-generated imagery in ad campaigns. If an art director can say, give me an image of X, Y, and Z, what does that mean for our jobs if they don't need to have actual photo shoots anymore? Exactly. By the way, I thought about it myself during that. Who's that guy? I thought about it because of that. Who's that graphic designer? He's Portuguese. Is it? Let's do famous Portuguese. I think he's Portuguese anyway. Portuguese graphic designer. I forgot his name. I think it's Rafael, something like that. What's his name again? That's it. Brulio Amado. Do you guys know who Brulio Amado is? Big up Brulio Amado, right? Brulio Amado has a very cool and distinctive style of graphic design. Let's see, Brulio, which I think started a whole trend of how to design flyers and artwork, right? So this Brulio Amado guy, I feel like has got an incredible distinctive style and something that I've kind of always tried to use as inspiration for some of the stuff that I've done for my bits of artwork, for my fucking shitty DJ mixes and whatever else in flyers, right? So I was thinking to myself, when I saw that ChatGPT, OpenAI image generator, and I saw a bunch of people making ad creatives for whatever brand they was doing, I was thinking to myself, won't this effectively take away Brulio Amado's pull and his unique fucking place in culture and in art and shit, and essentially make his job irrelevant? Because you could probably input Brulio Amado's style into that image generator, and they could probably spit you out a version of the work that he does in that same style in fucking seconds. Because he's really cool. I love his style of what he does. He sometimes will take a picture of like a concrete slab somewhere and use that as the base or the texture of a piece of artwork or whatever else it may be. But I feel like nowadays with AI, you could probably replicate a lot of this stuff if you just inputted it the right way, right? If you use the right prompts, you could probably copy Brulio Amado's style for your own creators going forward. That's the real troubling thing about fucking AI nowadays. It's legitimately going to wipe out entire people's careers. Similar shifts have taken place in music, television, and film, the article says. Software like Pro Tools has reduced the need of audio engineers and dedicated recording studios. AI, some fear, may soon take the place of actual musicians. Streaming platforms typically order few episodes per issue than the networks did in the heyday of Friends. And ER and big studios have slashed budgets, making life for production crews more financially precarious. I heard a rumor from somebody. I think it was actually the host of the new Rory and Moore, so I think it might have been Moore. He basically said that he doesn't think that Playboi Carti used his own voice in Timeless, a record, the hit song he's got with The Weeknd. Mal thinks that Playboi Carti used AI for that. He didn't actually use his own voice, which is wild, right? It's obviously going to be his own lyrics, but could you imagine a world where artists, if they're bored or tired or can't be bothered, they will use AI to basically rap their records, because you can use AI models now that can just sound that basically can be the voice of Carti, but it's just using his words, using his prompts as the lyrics. That is fucking wild. Typically, workers in their 40s and 50s are entering into their peak earning years, but for many Gen Xers, compensation has remained flat or decreased, factoring in the rising cost of living. The usual rate of freelance journalists is 50 cents to $1 per word, the same as it was 25 years ago. God damn, yeah. I bet you now, if you're freelance in your 40s and your 50s, you're probably still struggling. You're probably still hustling hard. There is no stop. You're still hustling hard. You're fighting to keep your clients. You're fighting to search for new ones. You're hustling. You're not getting no free lunches. You know what I mean? You're earning every free lunch. You know what I mean? You're earning every trip. You're earning it like, god damn. The precariousness has affected even those who have risen to the corporate post and media industry for nearly 20 years. Liza Denby, managed writers in a marketing department at Nickelodeon, the children's cable network. She started there in 2005, the year that YouTube went live. When viewers started dropping cable subscriptions, revenues declined. Miss Dembley learned to embrace new technology while surviving around 8 billion rounds of layoffs. My job never stayed the same, she says, because the industry was transforming under my feet. Last August, Nickelodeon's parent company, Paramount, cut $500 million in costs and eliminated thousands of employees. In her 40s, Miss Demby was out of a job. Yeah, that must be a hard one to take. She survived a bunch of layoffs, and then when it finally comes around, it's probably going to hurt more because you've been there for so long, and you probably start to think that you're probably immune, or you were probably protected, or you were safe. And then it finally comes, and now you're in your 40s trying to, find another job or pivot to another career. Fuck. Divorced and living in a rented apartment in Brooklyn with her two school-aged children, she was drawing from a severance package while considering her next career move. Working freelance, she had come up with the marketing ideas and creative content for family-oriented media brands. It's exhilarating, but there's an undercurrent of terror. She says, my severance goes until July. Oh, yeah. But I think that's a good thing about getting fired. You have to make it work. Whatever severance you get is the time that you have to find, is the time you have to figure it out. You have to figure it out within that time. If you don't, you get a regular job, So there's that dread at the end. But it gives you a defined moment, a defined time. Okay, cool. I have to figure this. If I don't figure this out, I'm fucked. It continues, the TV spot you spent very scary. It seems fitting that Gen Xers would reach middle age amid an upheaval. They always had cursed timing. Their moment in the cultural center stage was brief, roughly between the release of Nirvana's Nevermind in 1991 and the rise of Britney Spears a decade later. Many Gen X icons died young and tragically, a list that includes Kurt Cobain, Notorious B.I.G., Aaliyah, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Anna Nicole Smith, Tupac Shakur, Brittany Murphy, David Foster Wallace, Shanine Doherty, Elliott Smith, Adam York, Elizabeth Watson. Yeah, all those icons, man. None of the celebrities that we have now come up close to those type of personalities, those type of icons, the work that they put. We don't really have the same level of people anymore, and it's kind of wild, isn't it? But anyway, as Gen Xers, you're more or less expected to get reamed. The author Jeff Godiner wrote in the Cultural History, X Saves the World. Miss Morris, the prop stylist, didn't work for 6 months during the COVID pandemic. The quote, it was very scary. She and her husband, who have a teenage daughter together, sold their Brooklyn apartment and moved into a rental. That's gotta fucking hurt, innit? You work, however hard you work to get your, because it doesn't matter if the house gets inherited to you. Even the house gets passed down. You have to work hard to make the house yours, work hard to keep it, whatever. You work hard to buy a house and then you have to sell it in order to go back to rent just so you can get some money. Yeah. I guess that's a good thing about having a house because you've got something, you got an asset you can sell. But that's got to be brutal, man. Because once you leave renting, you feel like you've left it behind forever. Oh, yeah. COVID really fucked us, man. The profit from the sale allowed them to pay off debt and put some savings aside. But then Miss Morris' husband, a 59-year-old creative director, was laid off, turning them into both gig workers. Damn. Imagine being laid off as a creative director. That's a big job to get laid off from, isn't it? That's gotta fucking hurt. Miss Morris recently took a course to become a postpartum doula. A quote, I've been making images to sell things to people for many, many years now. I'm looking for the next act. That I like, by the way. I like people who decide willingly to stop pushing the creative thing and be like, hey, I had my time in the fun. I had my time in the sun, sorry. I had my fun. Now let's pivot to something else. Because it doesn't last forever. The people that are the most depressing are the ones that hold on to the creative industry until the bitter end. It's like, bro, it's better for you to leave it than for it to leave you. That's going to be worse. Just leave it and pivot to something else. You can always do that stuff on the side in your free time. But some of these people, for lack of a better word, term, they don't know anything else. They've been doing it all their lives. So maybe they have earned the right to kind of hold on until the end. I don't know. But if it was me, I would pivot. As soon as the wind started to change, I'd go the other way. Aside from lost income, there's an emotional toll. Feelings of grief and loss experienced by those careers are short-circuited. Some may say that the Gen Xers in publishing world and music and advertising and entertainment were lucky to have such jobs at all. I do. that they stay too long at the party, but it's hard to leave a vacation that provided fulfillment and sense of identity. And it isn't easy to reinvent yourself in your 50s, especially in industries put a premium on youth culture. That's true, but I also feel like a lot of these changes were happening in real time. And if you weren't aware, I think a lot of people were just naive and they were just, stubborn about the changes that are happening and just thought they could kind of ride it out and it'll be okay. No, you have to pivot. You have to adjust to what's going on. Do you remember how long it took for radio stations to embrace YouTube? They acted like YouTube was this like dumb thing. It wasn't really serious. If no one there was credible. Now there's not a radio station in the world that doesn't have a YouTube channel, you know? So I think that pivot, that adjustment is an important part of being successful or an important part of staying involved, you know? Quote, I know people who said, screw this, I'm going to become a postal worker, said Miss McKinley. Quote, there are still a lot of people who are freelancing, but it's dried up quite a bit in recent years. It's painful. Yeah, freelancing in general, you don't really hear people say that word anymore. If anything, people usually say they have their own business or they have their own studio, but you don't really hear a lot of people say that they're freelancers, which I'd assume is because the job doesn't exist or maybe because the term is a bit wanky. I don't know. What now? As opportunities and incomes dwindle, Gen Xers in creative fields are weighing up their options. Move to a low-cost place, remain committed to the work you love, or look for a bland corporate job that might provide health insurance and a steady paycheck until retirement. One of the many Gen Xers asking these questions is Mr. Wilker, a TV and movie director. In the mid-2000s, he made a devil's bargain for someone who grew up on punk rock. He started shooting commercials for Chevrolet, Facebook, and Apple, among other companies, to support his family and fund his passion documentary films. I think that's perfectly fine, by the way. I don't think that's a devil's fucking bargain at all. I think that makes complete sense. Look after your family. And I also think that's inherently punk. Taking money from a corporate industry, taking money from a corporate company, taking that paycheck and funneling it back into your actual things that you care about, into the underground, is the most punkest thing you could ever do. That is the antithesis of being punk. Taking money from the corporates and giving it back to the underground. I fucking love that. He had a cult hit with his debut, the Target Shoots First. It was a deadpan chronicle comprising footage that he had shot during the first job out of college at Columbia Records. HBO broadcast it in 2001, but cult hits don't play the bills. When he shifted his focus to making TV commercials, his documentary projects remained unfinished. Then came a plot twist. Those commercial jobs grew scarce because of the consolidation of ad agencies and the rise of marketing content plucked from social media. And with Hollywood banking on superhero movies, Mr. Wilker faced a new competition from acclaimed directors who had once specialized in the kind of mid-budget films that the studios had particularly stopped making. The quote, now it's a knife fight. Hey, big up Tim Dillon. Now it's a knife fight for every job, he said. The cruel irony is the thing that I perceived as a sellout move is in freefall. Woo! He decided to recommit to his first love. The results, documentary Flip Side, released late last year, is a personal film about the trade-offs required to support yourself as an artist. In it, he weaves together footage from his unfinished projects while grappling with the career choices in a wry voiceover narrative. I'm definitely going to watch that, by the way, and react to that. So definitely check out my Patreon for that one. For the theatrical release, he worked with whoever that was, an independent distributor founded by Mr. York from Beastie Boys, and he often presented the film himself. It felt very 90s, he says. It was the indie rock model. Get in the van, tour with the thing, get bodies in the seats. It made no money, but what it did do, this is what I believe Gen X's creative person, it confirmed my belief that continuing to make stuff is the path forward. Mr. Gentile, the former photo studio manager at Condé Nast, went through something similar. The company was cutting costs at the consultancy, McKinsey & Company, roamed the halls, and he came face to face with his own irrelevance. He was 40 with an artistic background. Imagine that, man. Imagine waking up and realizing you're irrelevant. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the world just changed around you. Now you're 40 and you're a creative director that most days worked in print. Would you hire me? He said. Maybe this is where I'd jump off. As a sideline, Mr. Gentile is an avid surfer who opened a surf shop called Pilgrim in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. He quit his day job and dedicated himself to the store. He and his wife, Erin Norfleet Gentle, have since expanded into clothing brand. Yeah, everyone does that, by the way. I think the biggest surf clothing brand that I remember, or streetwear brand, is Saturdays. Is that it's called? I think Saturdays. I remember them. They're still around, knocking around. So I think a lot of those brands do that. One thing I'm grateful for is the strength from my generation is that we weren't promised anything. I was prepared to struggle. Yeah, that's true. I don't know if that's true. I think a lot of London Gen Xers are quite entitled. I think I'm not gonna lie. I think a lot of London Gen Xers are not letting go. They're still out here fucking, you know, gallivanting around as influencers, popping up at every fucking private view, every fucking store opening. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think Gen Xers in London are a little bit tapped. I'm not gonna lie. Mr. Kendall, the Four magazine editor, also had reckoning. After Spin stopped appearing on newsstands, he took a job at BuzzFeed, the news entertainment site, and seen as a future of media by the time. By 2017, BuzzFeed was still another struggling outlet that was doing mass layoffs. Mr. Kendall, then in the mid-20s, married with a child, left for another media outlet. His wife also worked in media. The quote, "Then we had a second child, and we lived in a small New York apartment, and it kind of felt like the only thing we and our friends talked about was, well, what now?" He and his family moved to California, where they took an editorial position at a tech company. The job gave him security and allowed him to contemplate a second career. It's wild how in America, moving from New York to California is like a good financial decision because New York is so expensive, even though California is really expensive to live. You know, that's how expensive it is to live in a coastal city. That you can move from one and the other, and it can feel like you're getting a bargain. He went back to school and earned a master's degree in clinical psychology. Smart guy. From the past 3 years, Mr. Kendall has continued the tech company while practicing as a therapist on nights and weekends to earn his state license. I love that. He's still adjusting though, and after having a career as a Gen X rock guy, he said, "It's not the same as working as a scrappy music magazine where you all have the back issues in an attic somewhere." He said, and yet he added he likens having a job that is separate from his old identity, and the mental health sector seems likely to survive the next disruption and perhaps even benefit from it. Exactly. I think it's really good, to be fair. I've always enjoyed being into certain things but not working in it, right? I've always had a love for fashion. I've always been following fashion from a very, very long time, but I've never worked in the industry. I have no reason or no aspirations to work in it. Streetwear is the same sort of thing. I've never directly worked in streetwear, although I worked adjacent to it, but I've always enjoyed having it as an interest and a hobby. Same goes for DJing. Like, I don't know, man. I think it's kind of cool to have a regular job and just be into stuff, you know? You don't need to always work in these industries personally. And I think sometimes working in it can sometimes make you feel a little bit negative about the industry that you work in, because you end up seeing stuff that you didn't know existed until you're behind the scenes. And it can sometimes change your opinion drastically and make you sometimes look at it with not the most favorable eyes. At a party recently, someone asked Mr. Kinley what he did for a living. He took a breath, and for the first time he answered, "I'm a therapist." Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Big up Blood Clot Mr. McKinley. Big up this article. Really cool. I recommend you check it out. I'll put the link in the description for you to check out. It's a really good article, really thorough. As I mentioned before, the title of the article is The Gen X Career Meltdown by Stephen Kuritz. Please check it out. It's fucking phenomenal. I enjoyed every minute of it.